I was 16 when my aunt drove 12 hours from Texas to Iowa just to take me away for what she thought would be a summer vacation. She had no idea she was about to save my life. Growing up with a mother addicted to opiates and a father who enabled her wasn't just difficult. It was a daily fight for survival. My mother had dissociative disorder and narcissism, a combination that turned our house into a war zone where I was the primary target. From as far back as I can remember, my childhood was defined by her drug-fueled rages and my father's complete inability to protect me from them. The beatings came during her highs, when she'd find any excuse to tear me apart physically and emotionally. She knew exactly which buttons to push: my weight, my grades, my friends, my dreams. She'd pick at every insecurity I had, every fear, and weaponize them against me with surgical precision. "You're worthless," she'd scream while throwing whatever was within reach. "Just like your father. You'll never amount to anything." My relationship with my father and siblings was constantly sabotaged by her manipulation. She'd tell my dad I was talking back, lying, stealing, anything to turn him against me. She'd be awake for days at a time during her binges, pacing the house like a caged animal, muttering to herself, then pass out standing up with glassy eyes and a hunched back. When she came to, the destruction would begin again. I learned to read the signs, the dilated pupils, the erratic movements, the way her voice would change pitch. It meant I had maybe 5 minutes to find somewhere to hide before the storm hit. But there was nowhere to go in our small house. I'd leave for school in a clean house and return to what looked like a tornado had hit. Broken glass everywhere, animal feces tracked through the rooms, dirty clothes thrown from closets, roaches crawling across surfaces like they owned the place, empty pill bottles scattered like confetti, and ground-up pill residue coating everything in a fine white dust. The smell was indescribable, a mixture of decay, chemicals, and despair. On the worst nights, she'd hallucinate and run through glass doors or windows, leaving pools of blood that I'd have to clean up because my father was either too scared or too high himself to deal with it. The silence never lasted long. My parents would scream at each other for days without stopping, their voices hoarse from the constant fighting. The arguments were always the same: money, drugs, blame. They'd barge into my room at 4 a.m, demanding I choose sides in their endless war. "Tell your father what you saw," she'd shriek, even when I hadn't seen anything. "Tell him how he's destroying this family." My father would counter with his own demands, forcing me to validate his version of events. Sleep became impossible. Peace was a foreign concept I'd only heard about in movies. Money was always gone. She sold some pills but used the profits to buy more drugs. We were homeless frequently, lived without power and water for years at a time, and rarely had food. Most nights, my only meal was school lunch. On weekends, I'd go without eating entirely. The rest of my family had no idea what was happening behind our closed doors. My mother was a master manipulator who could put on a performance when needed. Then my aunt reached out during the summer I turned 16, asking if I wanted to visit Texas for a few weeks. I was ecstatic but didn't bother telling my parents. I doubted they'd even notice I was gone. When my aunt arrived, our house happened to be clean for once. My parents stayed locked in their room, too out of it to acknowledge we had a visitor. We left to get food, and when we returned an hour later, the tornado had struck again. Debris everywhere, the familiar chaos I'd learned to navigate without even thinking about it. As my aunt told me later during our drive to Texas, what bothered her most wasn't the destroyed house. It was that I didn't react to it at all. I just tiptoed around the debris and started packing like it was completely normal. This deeply unsettled her, and she asked if I was safe at home. I said yes because it was all I'd ever known. She told me what she'd seen frightened her and wanted me to come live with her in Texas. I thought she was joking, but after a few days with her family, I knew I had to take the chance. They showed me love, compassion, and care I'd never experienced before. It shook me to my core. For the first time in my life, I understood what peace felt like. We decided I would get emancipated from my parents and move in with them permanently. The judge asked why I wanted to leave, and I explained everything: the addiction, the violence, the neglect, the chaos. I told him about the nights I'd gone hungry while my parents spent grocery money on drugs. I described the beatings, the emotional abuse, the way my mother would threaten to kill herself if I didn't comply with her demands. I explained about the countless times we'd been evicted, the years without utilities, the roaches and filth I'd learned to accept as normal. I told him about the love and compassion I'd experienced for the first time in Texas, and that I wanted to live in peace. Their lawyer immediately attacked me, his voice dripping with condescension. He claimed I was just attracted to my aunt's financial stability and had no respect for my parents because they were poor. "Your Honor," he said, "this appears to be a case of a spoiled teenager who's discovered that life is easier with wealthy relatives. The boy shows no loyalty to the people who raised him, fed him, and clothed him for 16 years. He's abandoned his family at the first opportunity for a more comfortable lifestyle." My mother and father joined in, their voices rising in perfect synchronization like they'd rehearsed this moment. They painted themselves as victims of a manipulative child who was lying to get what he wanted. My mother, with tears in her eyes that I knew were completely fake, talked about all the sacrifices she'd made for me. My father spoke about working multiple jobs to provide for our family, conveniently omitting that most of his paychecks had gone to supporting their drug habits. They tried to goad me, to make me lose control like they'd done countless times before. Every accusation was designed to push my buttons, to make me react with the anger and emotion they could then point to as evidence of my instability. But I wouldn't let them. I'd spent months preparing for this moment with Carol and our lawyer. I held my tongue, kept my composure, and waited for my turn to speak. When the judge finally asked me to respond, I felt surprisingly calm. I looked directly at my mother, father, and their lawyer and said calmly, "If you're asking me if I have no respect for my parents, then you are correct. However, to say it's financially motivated is wrong. I no longer have respect for them because they have." Before I could finish, my mother began screaming from across the table, just like always. "He's lying. The little bastard is just." The judge slammed his gavel down, cutting through her tantrum. The entire room went silent, my mother staring up at him in complete disbelief. I looked at her, fighting back tears, and said something I'd never been able to say before. For once in my life, behave as an adult. You can't stop me by simply yelling over me anymore. You have nothing to hold over me now. You can do nothing. As I spoke, the judge motioned to his officer, who moved toward my mother. Her expression was frozen in bewilderment as the officer told her to get up and escorted her out of the room. The judge looked at me, my aunt, my father, and the lawyer with one sweeping glance. Then he spoke words I'll never forget. "I am sorry that you have had to deal with this for so long, young man. There's nothing more that you or anyone else needs to say. You deserve to live a normal life as a normal kid, and it's obvious to me now that your parents are unfit to provide that environment. You will go back to Texas with your aunt, and we will have our social workers check in regularly to see how you're doing. Make the most of this second chance. Good luck, young man." Adjourned. The bang of his gavel was the only sound in the room, but all I could hear was ringing in my ears. My father and his lawyer were escorted out, and the tears I'd held back finally came flooding out like a tidal wave. It's been 7 years since that day, and I'm happy to say I've grown into a well-adjusted adult. I have a great career, amazing friends, and a wonderful girlfriend. I've been in therapy ever since we got back to Texas, and I no longer struggle with the terrible anxiety, depression, and sleepless nights that used to consume me. My aunt didn't just give me a home, she gave me a future. The woman who tried to destroy me through violence and manipulation lost all power the moment that judge's gavel fell. The boy who used to tiptoe around debris and go hungry for days is gone. In his place is someone who knows what love looks like, what peace feels like, and what it means to be truly safe. Sometimes the family you choose is the only family that matters. Looking back, I realize my aunt saw something in that destroyed house that day. Not just the physical chaos, but a child who had learned to accept the unacceptable. She didn't just offer me a vacation, she offered me a life. And when I finally found the courage to speak my truth in that courtroom, I wasn't just leaving my parents behind. I was choosing myself for the first time. The cycle of abuse, addiction, and manipulation that defined my childhood ended the day I learned I had options. No child should have to survive what I survived, but every child deserves adults who will fight for them when they can't fight for themselves. My aunt drove 12 hours to save a kid she barely knew, and in doing so, she saved me from becoming another casualty of a system that failed. Today, I work with at-risk youth, helping them understand that their current situation doesn't define their future. I tell them what I wish someone had told me earlier. You are not responsible for the adults who fail you, but you are responsible for the choices you make once you have the power to choose. Life is good now, but it's good because people like my aunt exist, people who see suffering and choose to act. The ringing in my ears from that courtroom has been replaced by laughter, by peaceful mornings, by the sound of a life worth living. The judge was right, I deserved a normal life as a normal kid. But more than that, I deserved adults who would protect that life instead of destroying it. Recovery isn't just about healing from trauma. It's about learning to trust that good people exist and that you're worthy of their love. That 16-year-old boy who packed his bags around debris never imagined he'd one day help other kids find their own path to safety. But sometimes the greatest gift you can give the world is proof that escape is possible, that cycles can be broken, and that no matter how powerless you feel, there are people out there willing to drive 12 hours just to give you a chance at something better. Life is good, and it's been good for 7 years now.